Great. Thank you, everyone. On to item 6A, hearing on the administrative draft of the Urban Water Management Plan and Water Shortage Contingency Plan.
Yeah, thank you.
Good, Rena. I was about to say, is Rena there? Yeah, go ahead, Rena.
Good evening, everybody. So tonight we're having our second of two public hearings. Our consultant, Mrs. Laporte, is here to make a presentation to the board about the findings of our urban water management plan and our water shortage contingency plan. And what the board's going to do today, following her presentation, is you're going to discuss, have any questions for staff, we'll try and answer them, and then you're going to open up a public hearing for anybody in the audience who may have any questions or something related to the urban water management plan and water shortage contingency plan. And then at the close of the public hearing, the public comment period for the urban water management plan and the water shortage contingency plan is going to close. And after it closes, tonight there's no action that the board needs to take, but at the board September meeting, we will be before you again with a recommendation to adopt the urban water management plan and the water shortage contingency plans, two different adoptions or two different steps you're going to have to take at that point in time. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our consultant, and she's got a presentation to make to the board tonight. So Tammy, you want to move on to the next slide? Thanks.
All right. Good evening. Can everybody hear me correctly?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great.
I'm sorry, could I interrupt for just a second? We have some directors with some open mics. Did you have any questions?
No,
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Yes. So good evening, board members, President Schmidt, and staff, and meeting attendees. My name is Marty Laporte, as was mentioned, and my team has worked closely with the Mid-Peninsula Water District staff to develop the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan update that's required every 5 years. This is Mid-Peninsula's second public meeting, as Renee had stated, to review this plan. Mid-Peninsula Water District allocated ample time for public review because the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan includes significant changes about the water supply from your supplier, San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. The 2020 Urban Water Management Plan includes 3 documents, and you can see them here on the left. With the top one, the Urban Water Management Plan. The middle one is the Water Shortage Contingency Plan. And the third one is the appendices version that supports both plans with references that are key. Tonight's presentation focuses on key sections in both the Urban Water Management Plan and the Water Shortage Contingency Plan. And then we have time after that for questions at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. So the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan relies on information and data from other reports and other systems. For example, the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency provides reports and develops reports for all 26 member agencies, such as demand studies to forecast future demands. San Francisco PUC does modeling, and specific to this plan, it provided many renditions of models about the supply under different conditions, and we'll discuss that in a little bit. Also, the Bay Area Association of Bay Area Governments provided the population forecast for the future in this plan. And then we also used information from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change via some reports that were done through BOSCA on climate change. Other plans that are incorporated into the Urban Water Management Plan are the Local Hazard Mitigation Plan that Mid-Peninsula participates in with San Mateo County, the Mid-Peninsula Water District Seismic Retrofit Projects, just to name a few. The foundational data for the Urban Water Management Plan is from metering. In its 2020 Urban Water Management Plan, Mid-Peninsula provides data from the last 5 years of water production and consumption, as well as projections for water supply and demand through 2045. The 2020 Urban Water Management Plan includes new required data and discussion on water supply constraints from climate change and other known and potential impacts. Additional new requirements include energy use for the system, so we have to report that in tables and discuss that, as well as compliance with Mid-Peninsula's gallons per capita per day target that was established in the 2015 Urban Water Management Plan. Also, analyses of supply and demand in a 5 consecutive year drought is included, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Although the Urban Water Management Plan update is required every 5 years, interim updates can be developed. Next slides, please. So in order to really understand water use, we look at sectors, and sector descriptions and data about them are required in the Urban Water Management Plan. So it presents the water use sectors and the system losses. As you can see in this pie diagram, the largest category of sector is residential, with single family and multifamily. The rest of the pie slices, except for losses, compose what's called the commercial, institutional, and industrial sector, the CII sector. All water systems have water losses, and water that is water that is not billed or consumed for some beneficial use. Mid-Peninsula's water losses have been low over the past 5 years. We had to review that and actually include it in the plan. And in 2020, the system loss was 4%, which is very low. Next slide, please. So Mid-Peninsula, so as required by state code in the 2015 Urban Water Management Plan, Mid-Peninsula developed 2 targets. One that was an interim target that had to be reached in 2015, and the other a compliance target that had to be reached in 2020. As you can see in this graph, the blue line represents the water use from 2000 to 2020, and the purple line represents population growth. And what you can see is there's been a steady population growth while the water use has been steadily going down. Some of the dips represent droughts, and currently in 2020, the gallons per capita per day was 97. And that fully complies with a target compliance value of 121 gallons per day. Next slide, please. So the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan requires projections for water supply and demand through at least 2040. Mid-Peninsula's projections are through 2045. Looking ahead, the graph shows, shown in this slide, the blue line again indicates water and the forecast 4 gallons per capita per day for in 5-year increments. And the purple line shows the population growth through or until 2045. We calculated the gallons per capita per day using the forecast for demand divided by the forecast for the population, and that shows that Mid-Peninsula will be in full compliance with its 2020 compliance target for gallons per capita per day. In fact, it's going to go down some, and that is key mainly for several reasons. One is the ongoing conservation program that Mid-Peninsula has been instituting. The fact that technology is improving, so the fixtures that people are using in their homes and in their businesses are improving in efficiency, and also just the persistence of new conservation methods that Mid-Peninsula is committing to pursuing over the years. Next slide, please. So the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan requires discussion about constraints on the water supply reliability and a consecutive 5-year drought risk assessment. What's shown in this graph is years 2021 through 2025, 5 consecutive drought years. What you see are 3 bars. The one to the left, the furthest left one, is the San Francisco supply. The middle bar, the dark bar, is the supply with, and I should go back. The first bar is with what is called the Bay Delta Plan Amendment, which would restrict availability of water to San Francisco starting in 2023. Even though this is a 5-year consecutive drought, because the restriction starts in 2023, you don't see the reduction until then. The middle bar is the supply from San Francisco forecast if there is no restriction from the Bay Delta Plan Amendment. And the far right bar is the total consumption that's projected by Mid-Peninsula. I may add here that Mid-Peninsula Water District also has a contractual guarantee from San Francisco that is much higher than the current use or even projected through 2045. So you see this shortfall is an issue because Mid-Peninsula relies on San Francisco's supply 100% without currently having alternate sources. The reason that the severe reduction beyond San Francisco's service goal, which is up to 20% reduction in water supply, is because San Francisco has modeled its water supply assuming strict implementation of the 2018 State Water Board approved Bay Delta Amendment that requires a 40% unimpaired flow to be released to the lower Tuolumne River every year. And as Nicole Sankula, the CEO of BOSCA, told you, regardless of it being a wet or a dry year, that 40% has to be released. For BOSCA wholesale customers for the 2020 Urban Water Management Plans, San Francisco provided the 2 scenarios, one with the Bay Delta Plan and one without the Bay Delta Plan. And that's shown here by those bars. Mid-Peninsula's 2020 Urban Water Management Plan documents the results of supply and demand analyses using both scenarios. So their graphs shown what the conditions would be for the water supply under both conditions. Next slide, please. So now we're going to change gears a little bit and discuss Mid-Peninsula's 2020 Water Shortage Contingency Plan, which, as I mentioned earlier, is a standalone document, and in 2020, it's required to be a separate document. In previous years, it was an option. Now it's required. Water shortages may result for various reasons, as you know, and as with Mid-Peninsula's 2015 Water Shortage Contingency Plan, the 2020 plan provides a comprehensive process to reduce water use when shortages require such actions. Shortages may result due to natural events such as droughts and earthquakes, or supply disruptions due to fires, power outages, problems with water quality or infrastructure, or some other reason. In 2020, the Water Shortage Contingency Plan is required also to develop 6 shortage levels. In the 2015 plan, we had 4 shortage levels. So now we're required 6. To review the demand reduction and supply augmentation actions, as well as a new requirement for an annual supply and demand assessment. And I'll be talking about these shortly here. Next slide, please. So this slide, first I should just acknowledge that this slide was developed by Mid-Peninsula with a consultant for a brochure that was sent to all your customers at least a month ago, probably maybe even 2 months ago, to show the information about the Urban Water Management Plan and the Water Shortage Contingency Plan, and explain and illustrate the 6 levels. So under normal conditions, and here they're denoted by 0 in purple, the Mid-Peninsula Water District promotes an ongoing conservation, water waste prevention, and best practices program. The 6 water shortage levels are presented as required in the Water Shortage Contingency Plan, and all except the first one are mandatory. So level 1, 0 to 10% shortages is voluntary. As you can see, that with consecutive dry years or extreme emergencies, other drastic actions may be necessary. And currently, Mid-Peninsula is asking its residents to and customers to reduce 15%, save 15%. Next slide, please. So Mid-Peninsula Water District has been implementing its water conservation program for decades. The program has successfully reduced water use, as was shown in earlier in this presentation, using the population and annual water production data from 2000 to 2020. Mid-Peninsula has a robust outreach and education program that focuses actions specific to its water use sectors. And that is one reason that understanding the sector use is important, so that the resources can be focused appropriately. And also, Mid-Peninsula has what's known as advanced metering infrastructure, which is an almost real-time meter reading meter, and provides data that's almost real-time for management of its system. The investment in the AMI provides advanced tools and opportunities for customer interaction and notification about excessive water use or potential leaks. Mid-Peninsula also participates in the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency's subscription program and rebate programs, such as the current Lawn Be Gone and Smart Irrigation Controller rebates. Next slide, please. Through its contract with the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, Mid-Peninsula is dependent 100% on the San Francisco supply, as I mentioned. And under normal conditions, where there are no supply shortages, Mid-Peninsula's demand can be met through 2045 with the San Francisco supply. However, as we have discussed, the San Francisco supply reliability is not certain, and Mid-Peninsula is working locally and regionally to augment its supply. For the long term, Mid-Peninsula is participating in the regional Potable Reuse Exploratory project, also known as PREP. This project meets San Francisco's goal to seek augmentation for the regional water supply system. The other participants in this program are Silicon Valley Clean Water, Bosca, and Cal Water, and Redwood City. Currently, the process is in planning for a phase 4 study for the prep. So it's currently all in study phase. For the near term, Mid-Peninsula is reviewing the potential availability of local groundwater, and staff have are reviewing an existing draft report. For emergencies, Mid-Peninsula has interties with Estero MID, Redwood City, and Cal Water Services. The Mid-Peninsula has storage also, quite a bit of storage, and using the use from 2020, which was 2.66 million gallons per day, it provides about 4.7 days of water supply. Next slide, please. As indicated earlier, in the 2020 Water Shortage Contingency Plan, Mid-Peninsula is required to present its process for an annual supply and demand assessment. Through a systematic annual planning process shown in this slide, Mid-Peninsula works with the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency and San Francisco to determine if the annual supply projections will meet its demand. The first annual assessment is due July 1, 2022. And just to briefly go over the steps here, in general, Mid-Peninsula reviews the needs for its supply or demand request, provides that information to BOSCA. BOSCA groups the demand from all 26 agencies that are the member agencies, provides that information to San Francisco, and then San Francisco identifies their sources of water, which are 85% from the watershed in Hetch Hetchy and in the Sierras and local reservoirs, and then let BOSCA know by April 15th, which is a firm deadline, if the supply meets the demand of the customers as a whole. And then BOSCA meets with Mid-Peninsula and other agencies and provides that information. If it's a drought, then other steps are taken after that. And Mid-Peninsula would then start reviewing its water shortage contingency plan. So this is a summary slide. Next, please. So this is the final slide. And so in summary, Mid-Peninsula is in compliance with the requirements for the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan and the Water Shortage Contingency Plan. Mid-Peninsula has completed an extensive public outreach and review process, provided historic and forecast information and data analyses through 2045. Mid-Peninsula presents the information in these 3 documents: the Urban Water Management Plan, the Water Shortage Contingency Plan, and appendices. The 2020 Urban Water Management Plan update is comprehensive and responsive to the Urban Water Management Plan requirements, including new requirements for a 5-year drought risk assessment, separate water shortage contingency plan document with 6 levels, supporting data tables, coordination with local and regional agencies, and integration with Mid-Peninsula Water District's emergency response plan and local hazard mitigation plan. Thank you for listening, and now we can open it up for questions.
Thanks, Danny. Maybe Rena, can you remind me how you, what your recommendation is for how we proceed?
Yes, so we need to open up a public hearing for anybody in the audience or listening, or that may have questions or comments to make to the Urban Water Management Plan and or the Water Shortage Contingency Plan. And the board may have some questions as well of staff and our consultant. And upon the end of the public hearing or the public comments, then we'd recommend that you close that public hearing. And when you do that, we're going to be closing the public comment period for the 2 documents. And that's all the board is going to be doing today. And then in September, we'll be coming back to you with a recommendation to more than likely adopt the urban water management plan and then also adopt separately the water shortage contingency plan.
And just to confirm, we've received no public comments in writing.
Okay, well, I guess we can go ahead and open up the public hearing anyway. If there's anyone out there, Tammy, please let me know. I guess this is an opportunity for the board to provide comments and questions as well. And we can also decide, are we just providing comments and questions for staff to ponder and chew, or are we trying to, as a board, provide direction on some of these things? That would be a different tactic, I suppose. So, so no public comment, I assume, outside of the board?
I see no members from the public besides staff, the board members, and the consulting team members.
Okay, I will open up to the board then.
Brian, you need to close the public hearing first.
If we're going to be providing comment under the
The public hearing, you need to close, because we have a public hearing open. You need to close it, and then we'll go comments from the board.
I see Julie nodding, so all right then, let's go ahead and do that.
Correct, Julie?
Yeah, that's correct, because the public hearing is to get public comment, and if there is no public comment, you can close the public hearing and then talk about it as much as you like.
Sounds good. We still have our opportunity to talk. So I will close the public hearing. Thank you, Louis and Julie. Members of the board, any questions, comments? Louis.
Yes. Marty, thank you so much for the presentation. Very, very detailed. I appreciate that. Can we go back to the two graphs where we talked about population growth and housing? And I guess I have about 3 questions that I'm going to morph them into one. So number one, we have been for quite a while now with the 10% voluntary conservation at the California way of life, okay? And now we heard recently that the governor upped it to 15%, still voluntary, and that could increase at any moment. He could just say 20%. How do we take that into consideration when we're doing these graphs? Secondly, the population growth in Belmont historically have been pretty stable. We have some background noise here. Historically has been basically stable. Now we are seeing a lot of housing up and down El Camino, all over the peninsula, including Belmont. And there is a push for, more affordable housing from the state. How is that incorporated into these projections?
Well, the projections that we're using here are from the Association of Bay Area Governments for population growth. The water use is historic in this case through 2020. So it's basically the water purchased by Mid-Peninsula from San Francisco in gallons per day. This is the, on the left is the y-axis for gallons per day. So we're taking the ABAG population growth data that was used also by BOSCA for their projections for supply, for demands from San Francisco, and using that.
All right. Okay, so basically, if I understand correctly, is that anybody who is doing these graphs are going to be using the same data throughout that has been presented by ABAG, and am I correct?
So the ABAC data is specific to your service area. And so presumably the city of Belmont and San Carlos in your service area, the cities in your service area had worked with ABAG to develop these projections.
Tammy, can you?
I'm aware that some of the other agencies within the regional water system too are relying on the ABAG data for their urban water management plans as well. So, I mean, I'm thinking that might be part of what your question is. You know, is that something that's part of everyone's planning purposes or not? And I can't answer the question specifically with regard to affordable housing, but I'm going to guess, like Marty said, that because the data came from the cities of Belmont and San Carlos, that affordable housing component would be part of what they are projecting for their population growth.
Oh, actually, I can chime in here. Affordable housing is definitely part of the projection because we had to answer that in the urban water management plan. But of course, your question about the current in 2021 situation would not be shown here because as with all reports, the ABAC report relies on data from at least a year prior. So I think it's 2018 data was the most recent data that they included. So the governor's requests are not reflected here.
Correct. Okay, very good. Because you know, and the projection, obviously, I was not thinking about this current graph here because this is up to 2020, but you had one of the graphs that went to 2045. That is, you know, clearly projections there, and you know, if you start with the wrong information, your projection are going to be off, obviously. But at least if we start with information that is acceptable to, you know, cities, counties, districts, and all of that, then at least you're playing by the same rules of everybody else.
That's correct, and that's why we use the ABAC data as we did in 2015, because that data for population growth, job growth, was what was the basis for your model for forecasting your demand growth and conservation needs.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thanks, Louis. Matt, your hand was up earlier. And then
yeah, was I making background noise? I got muted.
Okay.
It was background noise? There's nothing going on in my house. Huh. Well, thank you for muting me. A couple of questions. One is the reference to the LHMP. I know that the district is actively involved in that, so San Mateo, but it's not final yet. So I'm wondering how are we incorporating a draft document that is still annex comments, I think, are due today into the urban water management plan, or is it the last LHMP that's being incorporated, or are we planning on incorporating the future version of it once it's finalized?
So by reference, the published document is incorporated in, and it's required that there be an interaction between that document because of the seismic risk assessment that's in the document. So a seismic risk assessment for the system is required in the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan, and that was where it's located. So we use the 2016 LHMP, which is the most recent published document.
Okay, that makes sense. And then I think the other question I had, and the report's very comprehensive, was one, and maybe this is to you, Tammy, that because the dichotomy of the water shortage contingency plan is that you have to lay out conservation measures that are achievable, that will get you to the proposed cutback goals. We have the Bay Delta plan supply issues, and so the water shortage contingency plan has to actually be getting us to that, recommending options that'll get us there. So I know you had brought in sort of outside counsel to advise on some of the legal matters related to the water shortage contingency plan, and I'm wondering if you have an update on any, and that was actually part of the reason we also delayed adopting beyond July 1st, which is the original due date, was, you know, because some of the to get extra time to think all these issues through and then have appropriate advice. So I don't know if there's any update on the concerns on that, and where we are, and how we're factoring that in.
Yeah, no, so thank you. Throughout the whole document, the language that we used and actually others used as the template from ours was just that should that document be implemented, you know, and I'm trying to find the language, you caught me off guard. So I was trying to find the exact language,
That's
but
fine.
it's repeated over and over again
Mhm.
as to how, you know, that could be, I mean, that would be problematic. And I'm trying to find it right now. If you'll just give me 1 second, because we actually used it throughout that to ensure that no one thought that we were necessarily coming out and saying that we agreed with it, right? That we as an agency agreed that that could be that, because as Marty mentioned earlier, we wanted to continue to say, we know we have a guaranteed allowance, right? And we don't want that right taken away from us, even if it's not servable right now. And because, as Marty stated, our customers use less than that, we wanted to make sure that we didn't somehow acquiesce, you know, in this document to suggest that we were in agreement with it, or that we thought that we could survive with it. So if you'll just indulge me and let me find that language, and maybe you can ask another question, I'll come back with it. Okay.
Those are the two main ones. The first one just caught my ear from today, and the second one was really more the overarching concern, and I just wanted to more hear that we think we've addressed it adequately in the report. That, you know, that matter's been we've been advised on it, and that we've addressed the concern and risk that we have. So if I think if the comment is that you think that we have, that's really kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah, actually, I do think we did that. We worked together as a team. And like I said, once we got it all incorporated throughout this and threaded through it, we made sure that, you know, that was our primary concern, is that, you know, it did not give the impression that just because, even though we were following along with the other wholesale customers with the San Francisco PUC's 2 scenarios, we just wanted to make sure, as Marty stated earlier, you know, we knew that we would be okay with our water supply, you know, going out the 20 years in a normal condition. So again, I think we're pretty comfortable with the language, and again, shared it throughout the region for those agencies that asked for it.
I'd like to just add one other thing, that on one of the slides, you saw this pink clause, the one with the bars on it. Maybe we could go there for a sec. And that is because the whole process is in litigation, as you heard Ms. Sankula discuss earlier. And so there is quite a bit of uncertainty about the numbers and the values. And that was another reason we provided both scenarios. So what the document cautions throughout the readers and users, because this document is used as a reference for planners and for others who are making decisions about development. And so we caution them that they really should contact staff before using these numbers, because the situation is fairly dynamic and it could change. And as the models that San Francisco provided showed, there were differences, maybe not drastic differences in what they modeled, but there were differences depending on what assumptions they used, just like with any other model.
All set, Matt?
Yeah, great, thank you.
Thank you. Kathy?
Yeah, so I just had kind of a question that maybe staff could bring back at a later date, and it's following on Lewis's questions in terms of where we're getting kind of the demographics, and not just with affordable housing, but there is quite a bit of development going on in the city. So I want to make sure that, because we're getting into a situation like with the slide that's showing up on 2023, the 47% shortfall, if that's implemented, that even though the development in Belmont's not tremendous, it's still development. So I want to make sure that the information and the data that we're pulling for our reports that the city has, and I'm sure they did, I just don't know, and I'll feel comfortable if I know that answer for sure, that they've taken into account that the developments that they have at Firehouse Square and some of the other commercial developments that have happened along the east side of 101.
No, I can respond to that. Yes, in fact, in the very beginning of the report, we talk about the system. And we spent at least one meeting reviewing what has been developed since the last report and what is planned. So we looked at, I guess, developments that and included by name the developments in known units, if it was residential or square feet. The types of development that are forecast and are pretty certain in the next few years.
Perfect. That makes me feel better. Thank you.
I was going to answer Matt's question now that I found it. I'm sorry. I've looked at this thing so many times. You would think I would know it, right? It's on page 19 of the Water Shortage Contingency Plan draft, Matt, and you'll see it. It's kind of peppered throughout this similar language. It's the third paragraph, and it reads that the San Francisco PUC assumes that the BDP, the Bay Delta Plan, will be implemented in 2023. However, the implementation of the BDP is highly uncertain because it is not self-implementing, does not automatically become effective, and is facing numerous lawsuits to limit or prevent its implementation. As the PUC acknowledges this uncertainty in its 2020 Urban Water Management Plan at Section 8.1, accordingly, in MPWD's view, assuming the implementation of the BDP does not reflect a reasonable or accurate basis for SFPUC's and MPWD's water supply projections given this uncertainty. SFPUC has expressed doubts about the Tuolumne River ecosystem benefits provided by the BDP. In contrast, the TRVA, which is the Tuolumne River Voluntary Agreement, has significant technical support to improve the Tuolumne River ecosystem, and is a preferable path forward that protects water supplies for the regional water system and could avoid protracted litigation. And then more discussion about the TRVA is presented in the district's Urban Water Management Plan of Chapter 7. So we actually took parts of that and put it in other parts of the Shortage Contingency Plan just when it was appropriate, and we did the same thing in the Urban Water Management Plan in similar language there too, just to make sure that, you know, everybody knew that we were comfortable and supporting the numbers.
Okay, and I guess my question was maybe a little bit slightly different than just, you know, not glomming onto the BDP. And, you know, because the water shortage contingency plan has to be achievable by law,
Mm-hmm.
and if we issue a water shortage contingency plan that says we can do a 50% cutback, we're therefore tacitly admitting that we can do a 50% cutback, whether or not we actually think that's feasible or not. So there's sort of that contradicting thing where we don't really think it's feasible, or it's going to be extremely problematic. Yet by issuing a water shortage contingency plan that says we can, we're saying we can.
Mm-hmm.
Because we can't be issuing a water shortage contingency plan that's not true, right? That's not achievable. Right. So it's that contradiction in how achievable do we think it is versus saying it is by publishing the document that we had sort of discussed way back at the beginning of the preparation of this. And I think that was some of the reason for the delay, is making sure that we weren't putting ourselves in jeopardy or at risk, and that other agencies weren't as well. Because of the inclusion of it, we're saying we don't think it's a reflection, but we're then also publishing a plan that says I can actually achieve that. So by publishing a plan, I'm saying I can achieve that. I don't know if I'm being clear, because I'm repeating the same thing.
You are.
But
Thank you for that clarification. So, you know, when we looked at the menu of items from which we could choose with regard to, or to select, you know, what could be achievable, you know, to get to that. And, you know, previously I've talked to the board about, I think because we've made it to 28%, that we could have gotten as far as 30 or 35%. You know, if there's ever a drought mandated, even though, you know, we're supposed to be covered by SFPUC only up to 20%, I thought that we could probably do that with, you know, the appropriate research, get to that 30%, maybe even stretch it to 35. So we're talking another 15%, which is a lot. And when you see the measures, they're drastic. I mean,
They're drastic.
discontinued service to customers who, you know, willfully violate. Water for new cooling towers prohibited except for health and safety. Require all decorative turf to be removed permanently and replaced with drought tolerant planting. Prohibit decorative turf on all new construction. Shut off all non-essential water services. All irrigation prohibited. Water for commercial manufacturing or processing shall be reduced to 50%. Water used for public health and safety purposes only. Customer rationing may be implemented. So, you know, we're all going to have to do those drastic measures if we ever get to that 50%. So we tried to select the, you know, the things that, like you say, could be achievable. And those are the measures that we thought we could get the 50% if we had to.
Okay.
I'd just like to add that in your 2015 water shortage contingency plan, you had to also include a more than 50% reduction. Except in that plan, you didn't have to go through the detail of exactly how you would do it. So this is a big difference here. The other point
and in
here,
that plan, we didn't actually have a scenario under which our water supplies would be projected to be 50%, because no
Exactly.
3 consecutive droughts ever got us even close. So it was pure fiction then. Now we have a water supply shortage scenario that could be that if you buy the BDP numbers. And so therefore it's now that much more real. You know, that's the concern. Last time, the 3 historic consecutive years never got you there.
right? So that's sorry. So that's also why the augmentation section was required this time, the supply augmentation.
You good, Matt?
Very good. Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
All right. Couple comments from my end, and jumping back to Kathy's question, and maybe she realizes this, looking at the slide, this is not a forecast of what we anticipate is going to happen. This is a slide of what could happen if a 5-year drought continues, which goes to the difference between this plan and the 2015 plan, is now we're looking at a 5-year drought instead of a 3-year drought, which maybe back then they didn't think we needed to think that long, but now we do, as has been proven in the previous drought that we had. One other thought, and maybe I'll go to some specific things, is I was looking at the presentation. I thought that we kind of split the baby on Bay Delta versus Tuolumne River voluntary agreement by planning for both, basically. And I was kind of okay with that. The language that Tammy read gives me pause. I've been following water industry for a long, long time. And basically, I do not trust what they have to say when it comes to the environment in the Delta. And I don't trust the Tuolumne River Voluntary Agreement and what it has to say. But I'm not going to profess that I'm an expert on that stuff. I just know that water agencies withdrawing from the Delta have been saying for a long time they can do it without harming the environment. And the environment has just been getting worse and worse in that area. So going to the slides here, can we go to the pie chart that had a breakdown of how the water is used? The landscape slide, or the landscape slice, that belongs to multiple of the other categories, but it's split out. Is that correct?
No, these are large landscapes that have independent meters, as I understand it.
So I mean, who would that be? Would it be like a commercial place
City
that
of
has a
Belmont.
large landscape?
City of
This
Belmont.
Belmont
They're
has
the
a lot
largest
of
member.
landscape meters.
I'm sorry, you're stepping on each other.
The
Tammy,
city of Belmont. The city of Belmont has a lot of landscape meters that make up the majority of this.
Okay.
It's usually meters that for watering parks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. And can you go to the slide that had the 6 levels? Thanks. Is there an issue with us saying that above 10% a water warning is a mandatory reduction and we're calling for a 15% voluntary conservation right now? Is that,
Well, this plan isn't adopted, so we're not following this yet. So we're following our 2015 plan.
okay.
If the 15% came in, I'd be coming to you as the general manager going, it wasn't a mandatory cutback. It was a call for voluntary conservation. And that's been confusing for the agencies here in the regional water system. And I'm not aware of anybody making it mandatory yet.
Yeah, 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 you're right. It's confusing, isn't it? So in October, this plan could be in effect, right? And then,
It could, after October 1st, well, after you approve it on September 28th, I think at the meeting, or 24th, yes, it would be in effect and we would be following this plan.
So,
and
but
we,
just to clarify, this is a % reduction in our demand, or is this a % reduction in our anticipated supply?
So for historical purposes, or how we've applied it, is based on a letter that we get from the SFPUC every year as a wholesale customer saying this is how much we're not going to be able to supply, or the reduction that's going to be necessary to supply the wholesale customers. And this
Right.
year it was just, we just suggest a voluntary 10% and really try to focus with your customers on outdoor irrigation. So that was SFPUC's letter to us this year. And that's the direction we typically follow.
so let's say this is October, we still have 15% from the governor, and we're going to be mirroring that with a 15% voluntary and just not following exactly this chart. Is that the way we'd be moving forward?
Pretty much.
Hmm.
Yep. Because it's not mandatory, it's voluntary.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, don't we actually have to take formal action to implement the shortage contingency plan? It's not,
You
so
do.
we'll have adopted it. We won't have pulled the trigger on it.
That's right.
So there won't be an emergency action. There won't be an action that the board has taken after October other than to adopt it. Once
Correct.
we implement the water shortage contingency plan and say it needs to be implemented, then we would have to decide which one of these categories we fall into.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I think I'm just going to bring up one comment from the water shortage contingency plan. And this is on page 43, first full paragraph. So I don't know if we can get that on screen or not. It's the,
Yeah, hold on one second and I'll pull it up. What page, Brian?
43. 43.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that paragraph with communication protocols, the third sentence about halfway through says, if a water shortage emergency were to be declared, the board of directors would be assembled to make and this is all about some emergency situation. The board of directors would be assembled to make a declaration of the water shortage emergency. So my thought about this was that normally I'm fairly jealous about retaining board authority, but this seems to me to be something we might want to share that authority or some version of that authority with the general manager. So as soon as an emergency becomes apparent, maybe we'd want the general manager to have some type of interim ability, or maybe just share the ability to declare a water shortage emergency that could be ratified by the board. So we don't have to wait for however much time it takes to get the board together, file even emergency provisions of the Brown Act, and get it into place. Maybe I'll look for staff reactions on that.
Doesn't it say there? And or the general manager?
Well, Yeah, that says that we would share media information and press briefings. I'm trying to remember, Marty. I know our existing plan says the general manager is the one that triggers the recommendation, depending upon, what the call might be, and I'm the one that takes it to the board of directors because that's how we've done it in the past here. But I can't remember if it's in this plan too that, there's certain things that the GM might be triggering it.
I don't remember this specifically, but I do know that the general manager is involved in all the decisions of that level. So we can be more clear here and make sure that the authority is also with the general manager to be able to declare the emergency.
Yeah, the next paragraph says the GM can help publicize, but it seems this sentence seems to say the board alone makes the declaration. And I think in the interest of speed, we might want to share that authority.
Yeah, that makes
with
sense.
the GM.
That makes good sense, yes. We can do that.
Unless the board thinks otherwise.
Well, normally in any emergency, even for, OES protocol or chain of command or whatever, I mean, the people in the field are the one that bring it to, let's say, to the council, or to the board. But for the sake of policy, the decision will have to be made by the board because the board has the authority to make policy. This will be a policy decision.
Well,
I mean, obviously, the general manager, will that could be simultaneously. When the general manager decide that we are in that situation, it could be brought to the board and or to the president of the board if the board cannot be summoned, and a decision will be made.
I'll give Matt a chance to jump in, but I think this is our plan, so we can decide how we want to do it.
Yeah.
And we could decide that in the interest of speed, the GM could do an initial declaration, and then the board is going to, as soon as they can, get together and either ratify or get rid of it.
Yeah, correct. But Matt, if you would permit me a second.
Please go ahead.
But the thing is that we don't want to be in a position that a decision is taken independent of the board, because the board ultimately has the power of the decision because the authority lies with the board, and you don't want to have the general manager on his own or on her own take it independently of the board.
Matt, and then Kathy.
I was just going to say, I think what's missing here is sort of the time element. The water shortage contingency plan as a supply level response document. We're talking about something that's in the ERP and the local hazard mitigation plan. So, what items would be that, there's not going to be a supply shortage that we can't meet on. However, if there is an ERP, emergency response document, that's the governing document where we're functioning under that, and NIMS and ICS and all of those protocols. We're not dealing with at that point the third or fourth year of a drought. I think that when I take this, when I look at the sentence, a water shortage emergency, if it's literally the local hazard mitigation plan and we're running the EOC and all of that, we're in the disaster. We're not in a water shortage. So I think that's the time element here, that it kind of almost doesn't make sense to have the declaration of that emergency tied into this thing. It's just the time is all off. But I'm happy, because I think what I would say is, we have an emergency response plan that already has authority for short immediate emergency response procedures. This document to me is really more about the integration of that, and then assembling the board to deal with water shortage issues, that maybe they come out of that. But I think Tammy has authority under the ERP already to do what she needs to do in the event it's truly deemed an emergency, as opposed to just a water shortage emergency. Kind of different scales, but
Yeah.
maybe I'm not understanding the document and the context.
I guess the way I read it is that it's chapter 3.45, you know, which is dealing with the ERP and the HMP, the LHMP. So I just took that maybe like it was out of context. So I just went back to, that's why I was scrolling back and forth and saying, yes, in those situations, because they're operational, right? Then it could be that the first thing we're going to do is check our water supply and our distribution system. And it could be that an emergency has to be declared. And then I get the board together and say, okay, we got a water supply issue. There's the potential for this, and then that's when, you know, an official emergency or a level could be declared by the board.
Yeah,
Kathy?
just to reiterate, yes, this section definitely integrates the ERP information for specific emergencies, not like a long-term drought situation.
Kathy, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, so I think Matt helped me understand it the most. That so the ERP has a different document on how we handle emergencies, and it seems like the one paragraph that's giving you pause is that if there is a major emergency and we can't be convened, then what? So it sounds like the ERP kind of has that contingency plan in place already, if I'm understanding correctly now. Is that right? And
Yes, it does. And so does the local
okay,
hazard mitigation plan. Yep.
okay. So I think if we have that, and I do agree with Lewis that it is incumbent upon the governing body to be the ones to make the declaration of an emergency. So I don't know if you want to have the paragraph rewritten and to make it seem a little more clear that we have a contingency plan in place, that the general manager has certain responsibilities and has certain authorities in the event of emergency. But in terms of declaring a water shortage emergency, I do think that it has to be the governing body. That's my personal opinion on that.
So, Tammy, there's a certain ability for the GM to do things pending an action by the board. That's what you're saying. It's something kind of like declaring a water shortage emergency. Enough to tell the public, here's what you need to do. But it isn't declaring a water shortage emergency, which is something the board has to do. That's the implication.
Yes, that's how I would see it.
Brian, if I may.
Sure.
I think that because Kathy said a word that that probably will make gut hang up on. It's the word convene, because I don't see it that there is a need to convene. I mean, it's a it has to be notified, like the general manager. The decision that needs to be made will be made, but then a notification will be done to the president, to the vice president, to the board, whoever is available. And we don't really have to convene in a meeting to do that. I mean, could be done like, I don't know the type of emergency, but it could be done in an emergency situation. Like all of us, we would know that we have been contacted. And the thing that I was kind of wanted to avoid is that a decision that ought to be made by the governing body is not made by that governing body, and that's not right. That's the only thing that I was getting a bit hung up on.
Okay. Kathy, do you have anything more?
Oh no, sorry, I forgot to unmute.
Okay. Great. And
yeah, we decided that if we were going to do virtual meetings anymore, we would actually have to go to a software system where you could raise your hand, because we're tired of this muting and unmuting thing.
No, as a matter of fact, I was going to say, Tammy, did we confuse you enough now?
Yeah, I think somehow with Marty's previous GM experience at Stanford, we can figure something out here.
Yeah. All right. And supposedly we're going back to in person in October anyway.
Yeah, and you'll see the final before you adopt it, and I'll make sure that we point out the language that we came up with. I think
Okay, I
we
appreciate
both
that.
get it. We both get it.
And
I mean,
I think,
Brian, if I may, that's a good point I should bring up, because again, we were talking about the 15% voluntary, and maybe it could go up, at a drop of a hat, you never know. But even the meeting in person, we've been saying September because that's what the governor said at the same time. But with the rate that we're going, who knows? Maybe something else will come up between now and then. So we have to be kind of flexible and nimble on situations like we are living now.
yeah, I did add the weasel word supposedly we're coming back together in October. So we will find out. And I was going to say that I think Matt made the comment the other meeting that we are not stuck with what's in here. This is something we produce for the state. We can continue to refine and figure out what we want to do in the future. I think it is somewhat useful for me anyway to wrestle with this stuff and look at it and better understand the district. So I do find that helpful. And thank you, Marty, for all the work on this. I think, are we ready to move on?
I'd just like to mention that your staff have been awesome with providing a lot of data, as you know now, having seen the report and working with. So we really, really appreciate the diligence of your staff and how forthcoming all the information and the data have been. It's been a pleasure working. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Marty. And thanks, Jeanette and Rena and Jean and all of your team, because you guys are responsible for all that hard work. That's for sure. Done a great job.
Yeah, thank you everybody involved.
So
Yes,
I'll
thank you
sign
all.
off now.
Okay. Have a good evening.